Here's why Steam Deck's verification system needs an overhaul. Baldurs Gate 3 is right around the corner and things are looking promising for Steam Deck. And another huge PC manufacturer is joining the handheld revolution. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to Deck Ready. This is my news update here that I do every week where I talk about all of the stuff happening in the world of Steam Deck and other handheld PCs. So if that sounds cool to you, make sure you help me out by subscribing and setting your notifications to all. I promise it helps, okay? The first thing I wanted to talk about this week is the drama surrounding the verification system with the Steam Deck. And this is something that's been growing in the background, I think, for pretty much the entire time that the Steam Deck has been out. And the game that seems to be the tipping point for a lot of people is a new one called Remnant II. It's only been out for around a week now, but this game looks, visually speaking, absolutely incredible. It's not only a huge step up from the first game in the series, Remnant from the Ashes, which is a game I got completely addicted to the year it came out, but in my opinion at least, it also looks like a big step up from the games we've been playing for the past couple of years since the next gen consoles release. And the catch with this game is that because it's one of the first and few games that actually run on Unreal Engine 5, it has some pretty next gen performance requirements as well. But if you go look at the game on Steam, it's Steam Deck verified, and if you play the game on your Steam Deck, you're quickly going to find that even though the requirements for Steam Deck verification leave this out, the fact that this game runs almost constantly at a sub 30 FPS with some pretty gnarly frame times means that by most people's standards, it would not get a green check mark if you asked them if it deserved one for the Steam Deck. Part of this controversy is also stemming from the fact that before the game came out, one of the developers working on it said that it runs great on Steam Deck. They had put like 15 hours into it, that no one had anything to worry about. And then again, the game came out and it does not run well on Steam Deck at all. And on the one hand, I understand why people are saying, oh, you should have never expected an Unreal Engine 5 game of this caliber to be running on the Steam Deck. But on the other hand, I'm like, yeah, I feel like it is fair for people to expect this game to run on the Steam Deck, because if they go on the Steam store, there's a big green check mark sitting right next to it, which tells you that it's a great experience on the device. And all of this happening, combined with the fact that it's happened quite a few times over the past year and a half that the Steam Deck's been out, has kind of got people, myself included, really feeling like Valve needs to readdress and reevaluate what the verification system means on the Steam Deck. So right now, to be verified, you basically have to hit the mark in 4 categories. The first one is that the title should have full controller support, use appropriate controller input icons, and automatically bring up the on-screen keyboard when needed. The next one is that the game needs to support the default resolution of the Steam Deck, 1280 by 800, or it can support 720p if it needs letterboxing going on. Both of those resolutions are fine. Text needs to be legible, which is a huge one that I think stops games from getting the verified checkmark and makes them get the little eye in a yellow circle that makes them playable. But yeah, for me, I haven't really run into a lot of issues with text being legible in pretty much any game I've played. That screen is big enough for me. I thankfully have 20/20 vision, so I haven't really had many issues with that, but it does say good settings, and I feel like that's just so nebulous that it doesn't really constitute what good settings mean. I'll talk about that more in a second. The third requirement is that the title shouldn't display compatibility warnings, and if there's a launcher, it should be navigatable with a controller. And finally, if running through Proton, the game and all of its middleware should be supported by Proton. This includes anti-cheat support. And if I'm being real here, I think those 4 requirements do cover a lot of the main things that you'd expect out of a game on the Steam Deck, right? Like being able to tinker with the settings is great, but expecting the settings to work out of the box is even better. You don't want the game to be maxed out, because when you're launching a game that's completely maxed out, you're not going to be able to even get to the main menu with quite a few games. So yeah, it is pretty cool that they at least require the game to have decent settings out of the box. But the one requirement that I think needs to be added at some capacity for like verified or verified plus or just something is the game running at a set preset settings and a set frame rate. And of course, there is a huge argument between people over what the expectation is on the Steam Deck. I think before the thing came out, people were expecting it to be a 60 FPS console, and for the most part it is, but not with a lot of modern AAA 3D games. Like if you're playing something like Dead Cells, Curse of the Dead Gods, Cult of the Lamb, Hi-Fi Rush, even if you set the settings a little bit lower, you're probably going to be able to play at 800p at high settings and have a great time doing it at 60 FPS. But if you're throwing something like Jedi Survivor, Dead Space, Resident Evil 4 Remake, stuff like that at the console or handheld or whatever you want to call it, you're going to be playing that game at around 30 or 40 FPS, depending on how low you want the settings to go. I'm sure in Resident Evil 4 you could hit 60 FPS, but you'd have to lower the settings so much that, to me at least, it wouldn't be worth worth it. I think at this point in time, a year and a half into the Steam Deck's life cycle, especially when we're hitting the point with the Xbox Series X and PS5, where next-gen experiences are coming out and really pushing those consoles to the limit, like stuff like Dead Space, like stuff like Final Fantasy 16, and now Remnant II, because that game runs at an internal 720p in performance mode on the PlayStation 5. I think the baseline expectation we should have for modern games on the Steam Deck to achieve that verified or verified plus rating that I kind of want them to introduce is 30 FPS at low settings. I think 40 is great when you can hit it, but with a lot of games, I've noticed that at the beginning of the game, it's super simple to hit 40 FPS at 40 Hertz, but then as you get farther and farther into the game and more powers and abilities, more effects, more everything is introduced that the game takes advantage of, then you're gonna start seeing that frame rate drop. And the best example I have of this is Diablo 4. I've switched between my PS5, my main gaming PC, which lately has been the ROG Ally with the 4090, and of course the Steam Deck. And at the beginning, the Steam Deck had no issues running this game at 800p, medium settings, FSR set to quality, and now that I'm literally in the final dungeon of the game, and in the 3/4 mark when you go to the pirate ship area of the map, that really tanks the frame rate and causes a lot of stuttering, whereas on the ROG Ally, I don't have those issues. So yeah, I think 30 FPS at low should be the baseline for this verified plus rating. I mean, I don't really like playing games at low settings. I can still really see them on the Steam Deck screen, even though it is a lot smaller than obviously a huge TV. But you know, if you're looking for a baseline that sort of matches up with what the Switch can deliver, which is generally speaking 30 FPS at 720p with a mix of low and maybe some medium settings. So yeah, I think the Steam Deck really does sit perfectly in that 30 FPS at low settings at 800p range, like without any upscaler or anything like that. Valve's priority right now definitely seems to be A, selling more Steam Decks, and B, getting SteamOS 3.5 out the door, because that inches us closer and closer to stuff like being able to dual boot Windows on the Steam Deck officially, and also to be able to install SteamOS 3.0 on computers that aren't the Steam Deck, which we've heard rumors that this version of SteamOS 3.5, could be the one that makes it possible to install it on a regular old gaming PC that normally uses Windows, which I know you can do with stuff like HoloOS now, but it's not really the same thing. And the longer this takes, the more I hope that is the case, but I'm not gonna like hold my breath on anything like that just because Valve hasn't officially announced it. But once they get SteamOS 3.5 out the door, I hope they kind of divert some resources to sort of reevaluating the whole verification system, just because, you know, right now we're sort of blessed with tons and tons of great games coming out. I mean, it's been relentless over the past few months with every week it seems like we get a new awesome AAA game, and in between these releases like Remnant II that don't run really well, like for every one of those you have a few more that do run pretty well, like Diablo. So while everyone's mad right now about Remnant II, Baldurs Gate 3 is right around the corner, and there's a reason why I think once that game officially launches, people are going to kind of move on from this whole verified controversy, and then there's going to be another game that comes out and doesn't run well despite being verified. People are going to get upset for a little while, and then there's going to be a big game right after it that does run pretty well and does deserve that verified checkmark. So yeah, I'd really appreciate it if Valve figured out some way to do this. Again, my suggestion is a verified plus checkmark, which basically says, hey, not only does it meet the 4 categories we've been testing for the past year and a half, but it also runs at 800p 30 FPS at the low preset, and you can tweak it up from there. But if you have any suggestions, I'd love to hear them down in the comments below. Next up here, speaking of Baldur's Gate, this game is about to come out of early access on August 3rd, and people are extremely excited for this game, and it makes sense as to why. It's made by Larian, who are the people behind Divinity Original Sin 2, which is called the greatest RPG of all time. But when you get a game like this coming out, obviously just like with Remnant 2, people want to know if it's going to run on the Steam Deck. And unlike Remnant 2, this is a situation where it seems like things are going to work out pretty well. So I'm not going to bury the lead here. Larian says, yes, you can play Baldur's Gate 3 on your Steam Deck at launch, and it looks rad. We are aiming for Steam Deck verified by August 3rd's launch date. It also launches on Steam Deck with what we consider to be the most optimal graphic settings, but feel free to play around. You'll be able to play with full controller support, and split screen will be disabled on the Steam Deck. And then Larian's director of publishing followed that up and said that they're optimizing it to be 30 FPS on the Steam Deck at medium settings, and it seems like that's going to be baseline settings, like not with any upscaler, because unfortunately this isn't launching with FSR 2.0, but they say it's definitely going to come to the game, and they're thinking around September when the PS5 release happens. I've talked about this so many times on the channel, but I love this cadence from developers where they say, yes, this game is going to look and run pretty solid on the Steam Deck. Don't expect it to run at 60 FPS at high or anything, but we're targeting 30 FPS on medium without any upscalers. And unfortunately, Yeah, we just had that situation with the Remnant II developer where they said they played for 15 hours, which I don't doubt, but it just sucks that people have a different baseline for what they consider playable on the Steam Deck. And for me, 30 FPS is the baseline, right? Like, I see some people who like playing games at 25 FPS and they don't think it's a big deal. That is not me. 30 FPS is the lowest I can tolerate, I think, just because it already looks so much less smooth than 60, and it also looks a lot less smooth than 40. So yeah, hearing this from a developer is awesome. And the cherry on top is that it looks like Armored Core 6, which is also coming out later this month, is going to run pretty well on the Steam Deck. From Software, of course, is the developer of Elden Ring and all the Souls games. All of the Souls games look and run really well on the Steam Deck, except Bloodborne, because that one's not available on PC. But Elden Ring was kind of like, and still is, I guess, the marquee game of the Steam Deck, mainly because Valve came in and saved the day because the PC port wasn't that great. So people, long story short, were talking to From Software and saying, hey, are you guys going to optimize for the Steam Deck just because you have this huge audience there? And it turns out that, yeah, this game is going to be optimized for the Steam Deck at launch, which, you know, is awesome. I'm really excited for that game. If I'm being real, between Baldurs Gate 3 and Armored Core, I'm a little bit more excited for Armored Core just because I don't really know what Baldurs Gate 3 is as a game. I've never played Divinity Original Sin 2. I'm not a huge CRPG guy outside of stuff like Wasteland 3, which I recently played. But yeah, I am super excited for Armored Core 6, and I'm really glad to hear that that game is going to be optimized at launch as well. And finally, here on my list, I wanted to talk about this new handheld hardware that's going to be coming from a big PC manufacturer, which is Lenovo. The reason I'm saving it for the end here is because there's not really that much info just yet. This is coming exclusively from Windows Central, and basically what they're saying is there's going to be a competitor to the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally from Lenovo. It's also going to be part of the Legion sub-brand, which is focused on gaming, and it's going to use an AMD Phoenix APU. Now, obviously, saying Lenovo is making a handheld PC doesn't get you any SEO, so people are kind of comparing this to the Steam Deck as they did with the Ally, but this thing is kind of going head to head with the Ally because of that Phoenix chip, because this chip is apparently being developed for ultra thin ultrabooks that are going to be focused on gaming, so you need them to run really well at lower TDPs, and it's basically targeting that 15-watt TDP that the Steam Deck excels in, but the ROG Ally kind of falters in, right? Like the ROG Ally, it really has that low TDP sweet spot at around 18 watts, whereas this Phoenix chip and the chip inside the Steam Deck, which I think is called the Aerith chip, those like to play around in the 15-watt zone. Now, of course, because this is a leak, there's no real information on what it's going to look like, but Lenovo was apparently making an Android handheld that they ended up canceling. So if you look at that, you can kind of see maybe that they might be using a similar chassis, especially since this new chip is supposed to be so thin and run at lower power. I think it's cool. I like that more and more handheld PCs are entering the market. The person who wrote the article over at Windows Central said that they're really excited for this, mainly because the Ally's ASUS overlay doesn't work super well, but I gotta be honest, as one of the biggest critics of the Ally, I've been using it quite a lot over the past week or two, ever since the 323 BIOS, I wanna say, came out, and they run a lot better. Everything on the Ally that I was having issues with at the beginning, like crashing games, overheating, the SD card kind of unmounting, all of that has been resolved. And I even went as far as to order a 1TB SSD, and I installed that, and it was a super simple process. So yeah, I've really come around on the ROG Ally the past couple of months, and I'm really curious to see how other PC manufacturers do in this space. Because from everything we've heard, ASUS is satisfied with how the Ally is doing, but they're not absolutely blown away, and it seems like the regular Z1 edition might be canceled. So we'll just have to wait and see on this Lenovo Legion handheld, but I wanted to let you know it was coming because things are getting spicy. They're heating up here in the handheld PC industry. Anyway, guys, as always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.